What do we got coming up?
Coming up, so still to come in this session, we have the Pillars of Navy Rum. So introducing Daniyel Jones from the House of Angostura, Christelle Harris from Hampden Estate in Jamaica, Miguel Smith from Mount Gay in Barbados,
AKA Coconut Finder.
and Benjamin Boothe, who's launched a new brand, Tamosi, but has incredible links to Guyanese rum history. So welcome to the stage, everyone. Welcome to Black Tot Day. How are you?
Hey.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hey guys.
Hi.
How are you? Oh, Christelle, I forgot you were in this session. I love you, girl.
Oh, look at the Rum family. You guys are looking great.
Are we? That's now. We're so precious to Daisy.
Yeah. We put you guys on first because we were like, we want to impress you. We'll give you our best.
It only goes downhill from now. No, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Now, I'm not going to be here for the whole session. I will pop back at the end because apparently I'm allowed to break, but I'm devastated. I will be watching backstage because I am super excited for the session. And, you know, I have some of my favorite people here. And I actually only just tried Tamosi Rum. And some of you who've got the tasting packs will be able to taste that rum now. And I was super excited to see what Ben's coming down the line with. He's got some really nice limited bottles. We're going to be doing a review of the Angostura #1, actually, which is one of my favorite of the Angostura series. So that'll be later on. And of course, Christelle, we have Hampden Great House here on the floor. And because Miguel... Oh, yay! And because Miguel can't find me any coconut water, I decided that we would do a little tasting of some TWE Mount Gay Black select barrels. So, guys, I'm going to leave you in the more than capable hands of Mitch Wilson. I love you all. Christelle, I'll see you later. Ben, I'll see you later. The rest of you, I love you. Exit, stage left, right, whatever stage that is.
Rehearse that part. Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's we're so excited to have you join us for our celebration. Now, one of the first things I wanted to look at, obviously, we've picked each of you both as representatives of your countries, and of amazing rums from each of those places. Historically, for us, sort of tying in with our story with Black Tot, obviously, we sort of named this session the Pillars of Navy Rum because we know Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad all played key roles in the original Navy Rum blend. But what I really want to focus on today is sort of looking at, you know, how that's evolved over the years and what that rum world looks like now. So looking at each of your islands, you know, I think one of the most outdated and probably useless terms that we have for categorizing rum, other than white, gold, and dark. The next step up for the more well-read, you know, rum connoisseurs then becomes English, Spanish, French. And one of the things I've always sort of gone into in rum trainings is how, like, you know, look at all these rums, taste Trinidad rum next to Guyanese, next to Jamaica, next to Barbados. They're so different. Like, it would be the equivalent of saying, oh, what kind of whiskey do you like? I like European whiskey. Well, which one? You know, it's this. Every place has its own identity, and I'm curious to hear from each of you, sort of, you know, how does that terminology, does that still linger on in your, you know, in training sessions that you've done? How do you overcome that? How do you educate people past that point? And maybe Miguel, if I can throw that over to you first.
Okay, so no, great question. Before I answer, I just want to say, Mitch, we want to welcome you officially to the Global Rum family, brother. You know, the family.
Thank you.
Over the years. And, you know, you're a great addition so far. So congratulations on this, you know, this beautiful day. Yeah, I think for me personally, for the past 9 years working at Mount Gay and 21 years working in bars, I've been trying to spread the idea of rum being defined more from the perspective of the raw material, being, you know, derivative of sugarcane in some shape or form, versus the older colonial ties. I still do see some uses for, you know, the terminology of, you know, French style, Spanish style, you know, British style is still relevant for people just getting into the category. But I think it's more it's very, very obvious now more than ever with the amount of different rums coming from different parts of the world. You know, sugarcane is 20 degrees north and south of the equator. If you can grow it, you can technically make rum. So I think, you know, specifically in the island of Barbados, we have diversities where, you know, St. Nicholas Abbey is using syrups. You know, we know Richard Seal at Foursquare is allegedly doing experimentations with juice and syrups. Shout out Richard, of course. And then, of course, for Mountain Gay, you know, we're rooted in the tradition of molasses-based rums. So there really is a wide cross-section. And likewise, for the other categories where you have, you know, South American style, which would have been sweetened rums are now, you know, they're amazing molasses-based rums coming out to South America. And they're also very much the same across French territories where there are molasses-based rums and agricole-style rums coming out of Union and others. So I think generally, if we want to move forward as a category, we should start, just like all the other dark spirit categories, look at the raw material first. But we're still understanding that, you know, we're in a time business, so stuff doesn't change overnight. And yeah, I think moving forward, using that terminology would definitely put rum back to its rightful place.
Amazing. And, Christelle, I'd love to get your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, guys. It's kind of early for me here. I'm sure it's early for everybody else as well. I don't know if it takes me because I was the only Jamaican who would come this early. Thank you for having me, and lovely to talk to you, Mitch. Thanks for the flowers, by the way.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us, Christelle.
My pleasure. No, but I think Miguel said it really well. I think, you know, for rums to be grouped as English style is really kind of a disservice to how unique each rum is. As you said, even in Barbados, from distillery to distillery, there are such differences and nuances that can be celebrated. And I think the same can be said for Jamaica. It's quite easy to start understanding the differences of even Jamaican rums one side by side. So the grouping and the terminology really, I think, it does a disservice, because no two rums are really alike once you get into it. So I'd love to be able to really start to categorize, as Miguel said, from the base of sugarcane, and then branch out from there.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges when people are first getting into, especially with Jamaican rum. You know, across those across the 6 distilleries we still have running today. There, it's, you know, there's so much variety. There's so much difference. You know, from having, you know, at the Appleton 8, we just tried to go into a Hampden Great House. You know, they're worlds apart, even though they're on that same place. So it's you know, and they're both beautiful and unique and wonderful in their own ways. But you know, without specifying, you know, this is Jamaican and this is not only Jamaican, but this distillery in Jamaica, and this is why we made it this way. You know, it can completely change your experience and what you're getting in the glass.
Yeah,
so with Daniyel as well. So obviously with Barbados and Jamaica, it's interesting because we've got, you know, a lot of different distilleries making different styles of rum and different, you know, maybe all with a similar kind of thread, but, you know, each with their own individual characteristics. Now, Daniyel, you kind of have you have the monopoly. You've got the one distillery on Trinidad making all of the rum. So one, how does that help you? Does that help you identify Trinidad rum easier in some way? And is there still limitations you find through the English rum categorization system?
All right. Well, before we start, I just want to say, Mitch, it's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. I have 2 issues, though, I have to mention. I did not receive any flowers. Just need to know that, okay? Also, Mitch, I would just like to put up a challenge that we have exceptionally great coconut water in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm challenging Miguel right now for a coconut water showdown, Okay.
All right, you've heard it. You've heard it here first, guys. We've got a coconut water between Barbados and Trinidad. I don't think. I'm pretty sure Dawn's going to be cool with this. I'm just going to say right now, we're going to come and do that trip, and we're going to test it out.
Is that an invitation?
Christelle, are you getting in on this as well, or?
No, I wasn't going to because it's a bit early for me to start throwing down. But I do have to say that actually the hotel that I work at is across the street from the Coconut Industry Board of Jamaica, and I would like to maintain that our coconut water might just be the best in the Caribbean.
Oh my! It's on.
What rum right now?
I feel as though I need to start defending the coconut water, but I think what I will do is I'll make you a promise that I will post the pictures, Dawn. I will post the pictures of you drinking the coconut water.
All right. It's on. It's on. All right. So, firstly, I want to say it's a pleasure to see each one of you guys. Miguel, good to see you, my brother. Christelle, it's such a pleasure to see you always. Ben, I don't think we've drank enough rum together, so we need to work on that. Yeah. All right. So to answer the question, Mitch, I think because on the island of Trinidad and Tobago, we have only one distillery, it has really changed what rum means for us today. And I think, you initially said that at the beginning. And you also said something that was very significant that really applies to the House of Angostura and the rums that we produced. Now, of course, you had, the big powers fighting for the sugarcane inhabitants. And we found that we had the Spanish influence initially. The Spaniards came to the island looking for El Dorado, the mystical city of gold. They found sugarcane, and they were not too happy. And then they invited the French who were running away during the French Revolution, and they played, a very influential role within building some of the early sugar mills on the island, like the House of La Perouse. And then, of course, we had the British, really taking over and creating that Navy style of rums that we have on the island today. So we do have a touch of that, of that French and that Spanish influence, but of course, it's a very elegant style of Navy rums that we produce. And I agree with what Miguel said in terms of, going back to the root of where it's made, because we have that similarity in terms of being molasses oriented. And I also agree with Christelle in terms of, the role of identifying the rums. I think for me, rum plays a very explorational role where you get to explore the island. It's a representation of where we are from. Because when you say rum to a bartender, it's a category of spirit. But when you say rum to someone from the island, it's the language we speak. It's part of our heritage. It's part of our culture. And the rums are an expression of that.
Wonderful. It's, man, I just, for a second there when you were talking, Daniyel, I just had this sort of sudden starstruck moment where I was looking at everyone in the room and I was like, oh my God, we're doing a 24-hour I just suddenly freaked out for a second. It suddenly just hit me what we're actually doing. Introducing our fourth guest, Ben. Ben, we met in the Netherlands where you're currently living, and you have one of the reasons why I thought it was so appropriate to have you in here is not only are you releasing your own brand, Tamosi Rum, but you have some incredible family links to Guyana, which I think is very, the perfect person to be representing Guyana in this panel. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your heritage for those people who may not have met you yet. And then also the same question, what your feeling is with this English categorization and how it defines Guyana and how you overcome that.
Yeah, indeed. So maybe a little bit about my family history. So my great-grandfather was the master distiller at Blairmont Distillery. So my grandmother actually grew up there. So she has lots of stories to tell about the distillery and sugar on the plantation, stuff like this. Also, his father was the master distiller at Albion. So two great rum-making houses in Guyana, which are no longer there, unfortunately. But that's a little bit about my sort of family history, and rum is sort of continued through the family from there. So whenever we get together, it's always a big rum affair. But yeah, that's a bit about my family history. So the question of categorization, I broadly echo what everyone else has been saying. So it's an extremely crude classification mechanism. Also, the ties to sort of the colonial history are maybe not the best right now. But I would say this, so where I've seen that classification being used in bars and stuff like this, there's normally a sub-classification by country, which for me is probably a better way to express how to classify rums, right? So by country, so Jamaican rums, Guyanese rums, Trinidad rums, Barbados, etc. But if we could, let's say, do away with the old sort of colonial style classification and maybe start with the raw materials and then move on to countries, I think, that puts us in a better place.
Yeah.
So one thing that's really interesting to me is that you've all mentioned raw materials, and we've talked about this a lot. But one of the things we're finding within the sugar industry, coming through to our molasses and the rum being produced in the island, a lot of the time, it's not possible for an island or a distillery to source enough molasses to make it all its own rum. So, starting from this raw material, how far back do we go, and how much can we do as rum brands to make this transparent? Because that's one of the things, when I'm looking at rums, and we've got great distilling notes quite often. We've got great, we're starting to get better transparency on fermentation times, maybe yeast use, all these kind of things. But often the sort of, when we go right back to the start, it's like, well, where did this sugarcane come from? Where did this molasses come from? And I think this is, for me, this is like the next level of transparency that we, like, how do we get that, and how do we make that more prominent and more an integral part of rum? So maybe Christelle, I'd love to throw this one to you first. What's Hampden's approach to sugarcane, molasses, and how does that affect Jamaica as a whole? How is it different or unique, or how is it together and unified?
Yeah, absolutely. There's just no way on God's green earth we'd be able to make enough molasses to produce the amount of rum that we currently produce, or that we were even producing some 5 years ago. But the demand for our rum internationally, mostly in the bulk rum world, has grown so exponentially that there's just no way that we'd ever be able to produce enough molasses. So that is something that we've always been transparent about, verbally and in our individual communications with anybody who wants to know. It's not something that we need to put on a label. If we ever had to, or in our communications, we would, because we have nothing to hide. And I don't think it takes away from the unique selling points of what Hampden is, for example. I think it is something that is shared among some of the distilleries. There are certain times in history where there has not been enough molasses for certain distilleries to be able to produce enough rum, depending on the demand in the future. That may be the case again for some distilleries. And I don't think, I can't say, I can't speak for any other distillery necessarily, but it is something that we've never had a problem sharing. But I actually want to go back to what we were talking about before in regards to classification. I know that Ben had mentioned the value of rums being classified by country. But there's just, as I said, there's so many differences between the distilleries, and really I think that comes from distillation method. Yeah, Hampden's fermentation, for example, or the nature of our geography. All of those things are factors that make us different, to say the beauty of Appleton or Worthy Park or Moneymusk. But the distillation method is something that I'm really happy to see. As you're asking about transparency, distillation method is something I'm happy to see gain prominence in classification. And that's something that I think will set us apart, because it really speaks to the foundation of the flavor profiles. So back to your question about the transparency of the raw material is something that I don't think we can lose as an industry. Any opportunity that we can get to be more transparent is the more that we can really educate our potential consumers and the people that already enjoy the product. So it's something that I'm on the transparency train.
Yes. I think that's one thing. We haven't all met in person, but I feel like we're all very much on that train together. So we're just finding the right carriage, you know. So Christelle, to sort of go on further from your points here, what would be the characteristics which you would say define Jamaican rum, and which aspects are uniquely something individual to Hampden Estate?
Jamaica rum is a national treasure. It really is. As Daniyel said, it is our identity. When we travel, it is a category of spirit, but here it really is our lifestyle. It runs within the fabric, the very fabric of what makes Jamaica Jamaica, and the characteristics. Well, if you want to get down to the technicalities, I will echo Joyce, the great Dr. Joyce Spence. Our limestone filtered water, you can't make it anywhere else because you don't have that. It's quite simple. The foundation upon which Jamaica rum is built and the heritage of Jamaica rum is what makes it special. We intend to keep it that way, and we will use education as we will use education to be able to elicit interest as much as we possibly can, and we know that our authenticity is what gives value to brand Jamaica rum. There's a huge box. Go crazy within that box. There's no need to color outside those lines. And Hampden Rum specifically, as I say all the time, we're completely transparent about what it is. Our open air fermentation, the terroir of it, you can't recreate it anywhere else. So all the distilleries really share their unique properties, but the values of Jamaica rum and what makes it authentic, that's what gives it its heritage. It comes from heritage, and there's no need to step outside those lines.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christelle. And Miguel as well, same to yourself. So in terms of looking at your raw materials for Barbados, but also, I think there is something when you try a Barbados rum, there is a common thread linking those distilleries, but then there's also, very unique expressions from each one. So again, what for you characterizes Barbados rum, and what for you makes Mount Gay as well?
Sure. I think from Mount Gay's perspective and Barbados, we've been producing rum for so long. Mount Gay, over 300 years. That the common thread of all the rums in Barbados would be Barbados. If we think of brands and the style of rums, those would have come after, and the gradual development of a Barbados style would have taken centuries. As Christelle mentioned, it is our identity. When we think about rum and the way how we interact with rum, from very early on, it's at birthdays, it's going to be at weddings, it's going to be at funerals when you're celebrating someone's life, and everything in between. So I think rum for us, it's more than just a liquid in the glass. It really is an identity of a people. That being said, when we start to look at the transparency issues that have plagued this category for a little while, the question of the origins of molasses, for instance, like Christelle said, in Barbados, it's just not possible for us to produce the amount of molasses necessary to fuel the 4 distilleries that there are in Barbados. Although, for a number of years at Mount Gay, what we've been doing is actually experimenting with different cane varietals. And we are actually the last estate to harvest our sugar canes in order to make sure that we get that molasses. So there's some exciting innovations coming in the future in terms of the connection of terroir. But I think finally, what's also very interesting is a little unknown fact is there's actually one of the oldest, most prestigious seedling banks for the sugarcane bank in Barbados. So there's one in Barbados and there's one in Indonesia, I believe. And it's been around for centuries. And what you would find is a lot of the species types of sugarcane, the grass, the plant itself. So there are about 286, 289 different species types. The majority of them are actually propagated or were propagated in Barbados. So for instance, they're usually denoted by this code, usually with letters and numbers. And whenever you see the letter B, it means that it has been bred in Barbados. So I think we need to be very, careful about when we think of terroir. Do we go back to the earth? Do we go back to the seed, or do we go back to the mother plant? And ultimately, like I said, like Crystal said, it's maybe a little nonsensical to put, your molasses on your bottles. But for sure, the integrity of your raw materials and the quality of it will translate to your quality of rum. Now, just finally and very quickly, what separates Mount Gay versus a Foursquare versus St. Nicholas Abbey, of course, is the master blender and the master blender team. So you do have these traditions and these signature styles also within distillation. Pot and column and the concentrations of the blends. What you're trying to express on the nose, what you're trying to express on the finish. And ultimately that is under the umbrella, which we feel very strongly about, of nothing added, nothing inside other than nature doing what it does, and the expertise of a master blender and the team. So yeah, I think this is the perspective of Barbados Rum, if I can speak on behalf of the other producers. And definitely from Mount Gay's perspective, it's all about transparency, which in some ways in the current company is a good thing, because as brand ambassadors, our roles are to educate people and to dispel rumor and hearsay. So yeah, I think that transparency and education would be first and foremost.
Absolutely. And so we've got a question up on screen here. So what is it that makes each product distinct terroir? So obviously I'm sure if Dawn was here, we'd be talking about terroir and wine and the grapes and the soil and going right back to that raw material and those 289 cane varietals, All about the grapes. Oh. We've got Dawn's voice from above here. But yeah, so, and I think you put it really well, Miguel, that it's coming down to the blender, but also, depending on each of the country's styles, your fermentations, your yeasts, your climate, all of these aspects of terroir are going to play a huge, huge role in what that rum becomes. And even if you said, all right, okay, I'm going to make rum exactly like Trinidad makes it, Mount Gay, I'm going to do it here on this island, it would always come out different. There's no way you could always make it exactly the same. And so Miguel, and I think this is probably a good time to really, call out the elephant in the room. I hear there's been a little bit of discussion about GIs in Barbados recently. I just heard on the grapevine. And how
you're breaking up. I can't hear you, Mitch. You're breaking up. Go ahead. How important,
and I ask this specifically to you because Mount Gay has so much history and so much heritage, and for many people, Mount Gay is Barbados rum. That's it. That's the most famous brand. It's most out there. How important is having a GI to defining, what does it add for you as a brand at Mount Gay by having a Barbados specific GI?
Okay, so obviously the GI that you speak of is quite a contentious issue at the moment. I think our position is clear. How I like to summarize it is Barbados rum has to be made in Barbados. It's the strangest thing to say out loud because that's the way how we make our rum. The technical details when we are challenged with regards to flavor additions, manipulation of sugar, et cetera. These do not, we do not believe that these are part of the culture of producing rum in Barbados. As Crystal said, there's this huge box that you can play. There's no restriction in this absolutely huge box where innovation flourishes, occurs. I think over the last couple of years, you've seen amazing stuff coming from Foursquare, St. Nicholas Abbey, leaps and bounds, us, limited edition series, getting rave reviews. And I think, if you want to ask Trudiana a little later on what her perspective is, she'll probably tell you the same thing. We believe Barbados rum has to come and be made in Barbados. So yeah, I'm not going to take up too much time within this, because obviously we can talk about hours for that. But the importance of a GI in rum is no more evident than the GI that exists in Jamaica. And then if you look at GIs and the AOCs and the DOCs that have been hugely beneficial for the Martinican rum producers, we can look at the wine industry, the DOCs, the AOCs. We can look at tequila. We can look at, it's quite clear. American whiskeys, there's, and of course, finally, Scottish whiskey, Irish whiskey. There are these rules and regulations that do not confine people to produce, a generic rum. There is creativity, there's expression, there's diversity. But I think it's necessary, if we really truly want to get back to what rum is. For us, we love rum, but really, rum deserves to be back to this prestigious place that it was many, many, many centuries ago. And I think a lot of the times, now more than ever, if I may say so, we have to look back to go forward. And if we look back, a lot of the times what you will find is, they were doing it right. And we're trying to fix ourselves to get back to a lot of those things that we were doing previously. So I think I'll just put that to bed. It is what it is. Barbados rum comes from Barbados.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for the insight. I think it's, we want to dig a little deeper in some of these sessions today, and I think it's important that, if anyone can talk about it, it's the people in this session here. So, Daniyel, coming over to yourself. So, and with both Daniyel and Ben, you're both representing countries which have nowadays one distillery, and so it's a slightly different ballpark to what we're experiencing in Barbados with 4 distilleries, Christelle in Jamaica with 6. So Daniyel, I'd like to throw it to you as well. Like, one, what defines Trinidad rum for you? Because and not just today, but historically, you've had other distilleries like Coroni in the past as well. What defines Trinidad today? And also, in the terms of a GI, would a GI be something that, for Trinidad, when you're the only ones making the rum, would it affect you as much? Would you want that still? Is it something that still adds something to your rum other than just being, we're Angostura, we're everywhere?
I would say that the world of commerce has changed today, and there is a demand for transparency. We shop differently. I can find all of the information that I need to online on social platforms today. So as brand ambassadors, we also have to be equipped to be able to deliver education that's very transparent. So I agree with what Christelle said. In terms of terroir, I think that is one of the factors that Miguel touched on that's very important. With regards to Trinidadian rum, and more specifically, the House of Angostura that produces Trinidadian rums, I will say that molasses is definitely one of those factors that I can, that has that similarity with what Miguel and Christelle shared in terms of importation. So we import, the best quality molasses that we can find. But one of the key factors that allows us to really create a distinction is that our terroir and the element of our terroir, in terms of, in reference to what Miguel said, Trinidad and Tobago is located 10 degrees above the equator, and because of that, we're positioned, in a very close to the sun. So you find that the heat is different. Now, the heat you would not know unless you go to Barbados, you go to Guyana, you go to Jamaica. It feels the same. But our agriculture has been affected differently. So for us, we cultivate our own yeast, and that plays a very important role for us to allow us to maintain that consistency within the quality of our rums. And I'm sharing that because that is what we share. That is part of our tradition. We've been doing this for over 160 years. So this has been part of the role for our production. In addition to that, I will have to say, and I have to give a special shout out. Miguel said it great. The blenders are the unsung hero. But there's also another partner to that, our coopers. Our cooperage is incredible. And I have to give a special shout out to our coopers because that is a big part of the process. All of these elements, when they come together in harmony, we're able to create our uniqueness in our rums. And one more fact I have to say that really distinguishes our rums is the vibration of the island. You know, yes, you have the good, you have the bad, but I always focus on the good. And I have to say that, you know, we love to smile. We're happy people. We get the sun, we get the serotonin coming in all the time. So we have this vibration, and rum deserves to be placed on that pedestal that it once was, like Miguel said, because it's one of those spirits that just makes you happy, man. It puts a smile on your face. If you sip rum and you're not smiling, I don't know what's wrong with you, man. You're not sipping the right rum. So this is part of the culture, you know. In terms of the GI, I will say that, you know, there is evolution. And at the House of Angostura, we've been part of the very foundation of the cocktail industry, you know, defining a cocktail with, you know, any drink that contains spirit, water, sugar, and bitters. And, you know, we've been respected for the meticulous work that we put into the bitters, into our rums also. And so there is that appreciation for the craftsmanship that we always maintain. But we do not have the conflict like Barbados or Jamaica with, you know, distinguishing and identifying the uniqueness within the Jamaican rums or the Bajan rums. So I think, you know, for us, a GI, it is not necessary, but we always maintain that integrity and we always try to maintain that consistency within the profiles of our rums. But like I said, always make sure if you're sipping on some rum, you must put a smile on your face.
Absolutely. I can't wait until we're all in the same room at Trailer together. It's gonna be second those planes start going again. And Daniyel, like you said, you know, GI might not be the most important thing at this time. What if another distillery on Trinidad was to open?
Big man, listen to me, right? Listen, there is big fish and there's little fish, and that's how the world is. I'm just, I didn't say that. Could we cut that? You know, when people ask me, what is the best rum? I always tell them, you know, rum is an exploration. And I think we have been given an honor at the House of Angostura to really lead a procession. We've been pioneers in the bitters cocktail culture. I mean, to this day, Angostura aromatic bitters is still leading and number one bitters. So there is a sense of respect that is given to us. And we always try to maintain that, because anything that has the brand Angostura carries that you know, that prestigious quality. So within our rums, and I would say if there's ever another rum produced on the island, and there was a few, because, you know, we have also the predecessor of Caroni. You know, Caroni has really created an impact, and still today it carries that impact. So for us, there is a demand to maintain a certain level of quality, and our craftsmanship, I believe personally, I'm very proud to say that we've always maintained that. We've always carried the flag of the Trinidadian style of rums. And if we go deeper into it, then we can go into the production. But I think if ever there's a little fish jumping in the pond, I think we're just going to share the love, man. You know, so that's how it goes. But we've created a protocol within the styles of our rums, authenticity, integrity, and of course, sharing the passion of our craftsmanship.
I mean, I don't know if anyone's picking this up. I feel like you're pretty passionate about your rums.
You know, I will tell you this. It is an absolute. You know, you said something earlier. You said you're looking at the panel here, and you're just honored to be, you know, sharing conversations on rums with these people. I've had an opportunity to drink rum with these people, and listen to me, man. Rum is a representation of who we are. And whenever I'm just a few days ago, right now I'm in the east coast of France, and so this is why you see the little old school, you know, scenery behind. But a few days ago, before I left, I was in Paris, and I was having a drink of Hampden in Danico, you know, and you know, so it's, for me, it's, you know, we share that love. We share that love of enjoying rum from where it's at, and we respect it and we admire it. So for me, when I see the panel here, I'm just like, you know, I feel like I need to just reach out and grab each one of you, give you a hug, and be able to have a drink with you guys. So thank you for this opportunity.
No, thank you.
When are we going to Jamaica, Daniel? When are we going to Jamaica?
Christelle, you made the call.
I have a hotel that's empty right now. I'm at 20%.
Oh, we're coming.
It's for you.
Fantastic. I can't wait. And Daniyel, just checking, when you were having that Hampden at Nico in Paris, had Nico de Soto already infused it with pandan, or was it?
No, actually, I'll be honest with you, man. So that was just one of the drinks. So we did have this classic panda daiquiri. So we did have, so Christelle, I'm just letting you know, we were all into it. It was a big crew of us. We had the daiquiri, the panda daiquiri, the famous panda infused daiquiri, and then we also had a shot of Hampden. And it's like one of those scenarios. Rum is appreciated where it's from, and then we can go deeper into it. But I always have this. I want to say one more thing in respect to what Miguel said about rum getting back to that place. There is this perception of rum being a poor man's spirit, being a byproduct of the sugarcane industry. So when someone says, the rum tastes like a cognac or the rum tastes like a whiskey, I always believe that no, rum is rum. And I think as we categorize the rum in its unique, in whatever style, whether it be by, geographic, or whether it be based on production, or just identifying the uniqueness within our rums, I think the more that we share our pride and joy for it, I think it's going to regain that place. And to be honest with you, I don't even think it's regaining. I think it's already there. It's one of the most consistently growing categories of spirits. And I think we just have to continue being proud about it.
Bravo.
Fantastic. I think that's, I'm loving this chat. I think I'm just looking at the time. I'm thinking, can we just carry on for a couple more hours? We don't.
And keeping you to time, Mitch.
But Ben, I'm going to throw it over to you. So Guyana obviously has a huge heritage of rum and the sugar industry itself, with the Demerara River, Demerara Sugar. It's had countless distilleries across the years, and gradually that's all consolidated into one. So again, looking at what defines Guyanese rum today, with all of that backstory to it and all of that diversity across its stills and distilleries, how do you define Guyanese rum today, and how important do you feel the GI is for that country?
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. You already mentioned the heritage of Guyanese rums. So for me, that's really what defines the character of Guyanese rum, right? It's that heritage that dates back to the early 1700s, let's say, when you had things like the Port Morant still being installed in 1732, then up to the 1800s, where you see the introduction of the Versailles still in the early 1800s, and later on the Enmore wooden coffee still, up to the 20th century, where you see the introduction of these sort of metal Saval stills and metal coffee stills that you had at Diamond. So DDL has actually been quite good in collecting all of these together. I mean, they were consolidated over the years, because around the sort of mid 20th century, most of the distilleries were owned by essentially two companies, Booker's and Davson. So it made consolidation very easy. And they all ended up in one house, which is in Diamond, where DDL is located. So for me, Guyanese rum is really about maintaining that heritage that dates back 200 years through all of these stills. Now, obviously, there are differences in sort of cane varietals that were used back in the 1800s versus now, or the way that sugar was produced. So the Muscovado method or the vacuum pan method would have meant there were differences in the quality of molasses. Or fermentation times, they also changed a little bit. So now they have fermentation, I think, for around 24 to 30 hours versus around 48 hours back then. So there are some differences over the years. But DDL's done a really good job at sort of maintaining that history. So you can actually taste the evolution of Guyanese rum through all of those stills, right? So if you start with Port Morant, then Versailles, then Enmore, then Saval still rums, you actually get quite a good sense of how Guyanese rum has developed over the years. And I think that's relatively unique. So in terms of like a very distinct flavor profile or characteristics of Guyanese rum, in terms of flavor, they make 24 marks, right? And they have 9 different stills, 24 marks. It's impossible for me to say, yes, the molasses heavy burnt sugar flavor is Guyanese, because you have very light rums that maybe have a more chocolatey note. Or you have very heavy rums like the Port Moran, where you have sort of tea notes and green notes coming through. So there's a huge variety in terms of flavor profiles. I think really, if I had to sort of peg in terms of production, what makes Guyanese rum, again, it's the terroir, right? So it's the ambient yeasts that are used in the open air fermentation. It's the climate, like Daniyel also mentioned. So Guyana is on the equator. It's extremely hot. It's extremely, extremely humid. And this has an impact on rum making as well. So yeah, that's more or less how I would describe sort of Guyanese rum in terms of the evolution and characteristics. In terms of a GI, yeah, okay, so it's one distillery on the island, in the country. So we don't have the same problems as Barbados or Jamaica in terms of defining what should be the GI. In fact, Guyana, I think, has a GI, but it's so far, I think, only applicable in Guyana and a few other Caribbean countries. It hasn't really been exported to the US or Europe yet, but I think that's ongoing. So I think they'll have a GI around Demerara rum. I do think it's important, right? So it stops imitators coming in. So I think they had problems with people calling something Demerara rum when it had maybe a bit of Demerara rum and a bit of rum from somewhere else, right? And I think it was very important for them to sort of lock that down, which is what they're doing now. But yeah, I think, echoing sort of the comments from other people, I think GIs are incredibly important, especially, if we move to a sort of classification system where country is involved. And I understand that within one country, you can have many, many different styles even. But if you do want to incorporate country into a classification system, then GIs are going to be absolutely at the forefront of that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ben. That's great. And just out of all your stills, because I think you might be winning the still battle here. I can't be sure, but do you have a favorite out of there? What would be your go-to?
Port Moran Port Moran or the French Saval still. Port Moran is fantastic. Yes. French Saval still, you can make so many different beautiful expressions. So from the Albion, Skeldon, Blairmont, Rose Hall, La Bonne Intention. So basically a lot of the old distilleries, also where my forefathers would have worked, their style of rum is maintained on this Saval still. So for that reason, it holds a very special place in my heart. But pure flavor alone, Port Moran every time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. So Christelle, I'd love to ask you a question now. So obviously we work at Black Tot, we work with a blend. So we have blends of different rums, and our new one has Barbados, Guyana, Jamaica in it. Now Hampden's for me a great example of a rum that's probably only really come on people's radars quite recently in sort of the rum community, and suddenly become like this huge, amazing thing that everyone's like, yes, Hampden, amazing. But it has this huge history as supplying rum for blenders. And I'm curious to get your perception on this now. How important is, a blended rum or selling rum for blends that might not carry the distillery name versus having your own Hampden brand front and foremost now?
Thanks for that question, Mitch. I'm really happy to be able to answer that question anytime it's posed to me, because I think there's this misconception that now that we're releasing our own brands, that's the be all and end all, that is the end goal. And the truth is, had it not been for Hampden's prestige and Hampden's identity has come from the fact that it has this history of being a bulk rum that's sold to blenders. So I think there's huge value in both of them. Number one, most of our rum is still sold in bulk. So from a purely economic point of view, from a financial point of view, without that, the distillery can't make any single origin rum, any Hampden Estate tropical aged bottled rum. That's just from a purely economic point of view. So there's that value. But then also there's the history of the foundation of what Hampden is and why everybody knows about it and why it's revered and why the single origin tropical aged rum that we are currently producing has this cult following. Without the foundation of it as a blending rum, I don't really see how that would exist. So I think there's a huge amount of importance, obviously historically, but also in the present and in the future. So I'd like to see that continue into years to come.
Do you think, I mean, if we using, say, the whiskey world as an example, where we've got, historically blends would have been, very much the bread and butter of everything. And then over the years, we've seen this movement towards, more single malts, more distillery releases, and localizing that more and more and more until people had their favorites. Do you feel we're starting to see this more in the rum world? Do you think this is a good thing? And do you think, especially with Hampden, this is sort of playing to your strengths now, coming to the front and putting the distillery name on the label?
I'm comfortable with my distillery name on my label, and that is because I know what's going in the bottle. Obviously, if I work with another company and we're doing a release together, or somehow the release is endorsed by us, and we can be sure about the integrity of the product, upholding the same value system of categorization and transparency that we do, then that's a conversation that could be had. Anything outside that, I'd be a little bit uncomfortable with going forward. That may not have always been the case, but we weren't at this juncture before, ever. So going forward, I'd like to be where I can have control over it, and I can be sure that the integrity of the product stands in line with my integrity for what Hampden is. I'm not sure if I answered the question. I ramble all the time, guys, just so you know. And sometimes I forget what the question was, and I get really caught up in what I'm saying. Sometimes I seem a little bit, it's bottle blonde, and I swear I have a lot of information, but sometimes I have to.
Christelle, you're amazing, and it's fascinating to get your insights. It's like I think so many people are just so excited. We're seeing so many comments popping up, and everything. Everyone's loving having you guys all here. So please make sure you throw these guys some love in the comments if you're watching along at home as well. But Miguel, as well, going over to yourself, Mount Gay is probably one of the oldest examples of a brand that's been synonymous with the distillery and put that brand name forward and the distillery name forward together. What's your experience with that? Do you have much involvement with bulk rums? Does it have our blends with Mount Gay useful or helpful in any way, or is it really all about just your own bottlings?
Well, before I get to that, let me say, we've been waiting. When I say we, it's all of us included. But anyone that has any interest or is part of this beautiful family, we've been waiting for, I think, 2020, if that sounds really strange. Because, the consumer is upon us. Where we've been producing these beautiful liquids for centuries, what we've been fighting against is in a lot of cases, the misinformation. So building on Barbados and building on Mount Gay is something that we've been doing, forever, and we will continue. So I think from the perspective of I think is a question based on what's the value of having a brand and the brand Barbados and Mount Gay. It's very, very important. We have never really been a bulk rum producer. There have been, in our history, there are a few. I mean, I think when I first started, there was a Duncan Taylor. And if anyone out there has a Barbados Duncan Taylor, I'll be happy to have a discussion with you. And maybe, but there are very few, very, very few Mount Gay third-party, independent bottles. I think most famously, Luca just released a Velier that has Mount Gay on it. And it's history making, because for the first time we really have said we're happy for our name to go on the bottle. And I think that's really connected to, as I said, the consumer is here and now. People want transparency. They want to dive a little bit deeper, even within, the understanding of the commercial benefits of bulk rum production. We know there are 2 distilleries in Barbados that do that. We know it's important. Me being a Bajan, see my Bajan flag, my concern is still going to come back to my love for my people and employment and all the other benefits that come with that. However, we do stand by, we do believe, and I'm sure Christelle would, she said it so well, she wants her distillery on her bottle because she can stand next to it and say she knows what's inside. But also we need to consider that tropical maturation is superior. There's no question about it. It's not, us being emotional, it's scientifically proven. So I think there's room for blenders and independent bottlers, and surely they're a reactive business, so they can they can release limited editions, 1 cask or 2 casks at a time. It's not necessarily where we play, but what you might have noticed in Mount Gay in the past 3 years is these limited edition releases that we've been doing. So what we've been we've been waiting for that consumer, because after all, we're still a time business. We can't be as reactive as the gin and the vodkas, for instance. We're still waiting on these liquids to mature and for nature to give what nature is willing to give to these liquids, and then we have to see if they work. But there's still a lot of love for those. If you look at a few of the things I have in the background, I'm a rum guy. I've got Mount Gilboa, of course. I've got Veliers, I've got Martinican rums. I love what the what's it called, the Old Navy, the very first Old Navy Velier. I always tell Dawn is one of the most incredible rums I've ever tasted. But I still think there's a place for the origin of where the rum comes from should resonate a little bit higher than if it was just taken away, because production of the rum, where it comes from and all of that gives a distinction of the flavor, the texture, the aroma, etc., etc. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. And no, I think this is one of the interesting aspects, for me now, working with Black Tot as a blend, finding out those origins, being able to being able to give that information, being able to say, as you guys have mentioned, being happy that if we had rum from your distillery in our blend, that you'd be happy for us to put that on the label. As we push for transparency and we push to communicate all of the individual aspects from it. Like, the worst thing in the world for me would be to say, oh, it's just a Caribbean blend. Well, what does that tell you? As we can see from just our speakers today, absolutely nothing. So, one of the things we're working on is we got, for our finest Caribbean, we've got all our individual components. So all of the individual rums that go into the blend, when we do a masterclass, we get people to try, here's the Barbados component, here are the 2 Guyanese components, here's the Jamaica component. So that, if someone's getting into rum for the first time, they get to try all of those distilleries next to each other, and we tell them where they're from and how old and what tropical age and everything else going on. And then they can hopefully appreciate, what we've tried to put together when we come to the final blend. And, for me, this is the next step for blends to be able to support the distilleries more, is to give that extra layer of transparency. But as you say, you've got to be happy with how that rum tastes as well. So hopefully, if we're using any of your rums, that you'll like it. But Daniyel, I'd love to ask you a question sort of as we're coming towards the end. And again, if anyone's watching at home, please throw up any questions in the comments for these guys, because we've got a wealth of experience here. But as Miguel mentioned, I've recently joined the Global Rum family, and I'm absolutely honored to be here with you all. So I would love to get tips from each of you. What would be your key tips? What advice would you give to a new Global Rum ambassador? What can we do to make the rum industry better? Daniyel.
Oh man, there's so many components to that, man. It's I will say, I'm going to summarize it just for you. I'm going to give you one clear-cut point would be, share what rum means to you. That's it. And if you're, for us, it may be a bit different because we're from the island and that we represent the rums. But I will say, once you find a passion, once you love it, once you enjoy it, share that. Share the way you enjoy it. Share what it means to you. And I think that resonates a lot more because I feel like whenever I'm sharing, whether it be masterclass or rum tasting, I always feel like when you give an emotional connection, you leave something with that person or the people that you're sharing it with. And I think that's most significant as opposed to, yes, I'm going to go through the production. Yes, I'm going to go through the heritage. And those all play a very influential role. But that emotional connection is very important also.
I love it. And I think for anyone who isn't maybe born into rum, like, I grew up in Essex in England. The closest thing I'd seen to rum was Sailor Jerry. And, I came to Trailer Happiness and I was suddenly like in this baptism of fire, quite literally, and suddenly brought into rum. And I think there's a common connection with all the people who get introduced into rum who maybe weren't born with it first. You always remember that first moment. You always remember that moment where you go, I think rum's going to be my spirit. I think, forget gin, forget whiskey, forget all these guys. I think rum's going to be my thing, and, for me, it's a very visual moment.
We're not forgetting champagne.
And champagne, obviously. Fiona asks, all the way from Australia, how would you bring a person into rum? So Daniyel, I feel like you would just look at a person and they would just be immediately, I'm now into rum. But do you have any tips? We convert the unconverted.
Oh, man. To answer that question, I'll give you a scenario. I always remember whenever I have tastings to do with a lot of the affluent clients, and let's just say it's a panel of whiskey aficionados, and connoisseurs, and you stand in the room and you look at them and they give you this very judgmental look because they're like, we drink whiskey, we drink high-end scotch. What are you going to tell us about rum? And I've reached a point in where I feel I'm excited to meet those type of clientele because it's always an opportunity. You see, when you go into, let's say you're going to a wine tasting or whiskey tasting, you feel like you have to know. You feel like you have to know whiskey. You feel like you have to already have a 34-year-old scotch before you go into a forum like that. With rum, because you think it's a pirate's drink or you think you don't know much about it, but you think it's not as prestigious, you're going with an open mindset. And I don't look at that negatively. I look at that as a very positive opportunity to really captivate into the rum culture. And it works. And I'll tell you why, because you come in with an openness and I can share a lot more. I can share about the history, the heritage, the vibration, and that happiness. You leave with that joy. And I can tell you, no other spirit can do that. Cognac, whiskey, I can tell you what rum brings to the spirit category is very unique. And I think this is why people look forward to rum tastings. They look forward to panels like this to be able to learn more and to enjoy it. So an introduction to rum is very easy. All I have to do is say, hey, let's have a drink.
And Ben, how would you bring someone into rum? Because I've seen you work your magic. I've seen you've turned up with, special bottlings and cast releases and,
Yeah.
I know I'm hopefully going back to Amsterdam soon and I'm hoping you've still got some left. But how would you convert someone into rum?
So kind of two ways, right? So always with sort of education with passion, right? As Daniyel said, you need to really show your passion for the product and the culture that comes with it as well. So for me, that's the starting point. But secondly, share the good stuff, right? Don't hold all the good stuff to yourself. When I give a tasting or have people around, I give them the best stuff that I have, right? And after that, they always leave with a love for rum, a fondness for rum, whatever you call it. It's actually pretty easy to convert people once you get them to taste the good stuff. All right, as Daniyel said, no one drinks good rum and doesn't smile. So easy as that.
It definitely helps. Christelle, have you converted many unenlightened people to the world of rum? How do you work your magic?
I don't know. I am just honest. I'm passionate. I never knew anything about rum. I always give people a bit of an introduction by saying I knew nothing.
and I'm still learning, and I learn every day. And by doing that, I think it becomes a little bit less intimidating, because it can be a very confusing category, because there's so many different definitions and categorizations, and it's a bit overwhelming. So I like to level the playing field and make people realize that, they look at me and they think I'm some sort of expert. I'm like, no, I drink a lot of everything. And what I like to say is, just try everything until you decide what it is that you like. But always give them the education to go along with it, so that they understand what it is that they're drinking, and they can have appreciation for the value, however they derive that value. But always make it fun. I guess I'm always kind of a little bit light anyway. I'm always a little bit fun. So never take that away from it. Don't get too geeky, unless it is that you're speaking to a direct rum nerd, and I celebrate them every day. I love my rum nerd. And I love them because I actually learn so much from each and every one of them. But always make it fun, because rum is fun.
Absolutely. Yes. Big shout out to all the rum nerds out there. And Christelle, any tips for a new global ambassador? How would you, what advice would you give?
I'd like some tips. I have no idea. I'm a hotelier. I'm not really a rum ambassador. I just drink a lot of it. So, no, from me to you, meet as many people as you can, share stories, get them to share their stories, and come and visit as many of us as we possibly can. And let's keep spreading the rum love and energy and positivity, despite this time that we're in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And Miguel.
Yes.
How do we convert the masses, Miguel?
Oh man, my life's work. Taste. I think just, expose yourself to as much flavors as you possibly can. First and foremost. After that, then you fall in love. Whichever style you fall in love with, you research, you pursue, you search, for how it's made, where it's from, how to drink it, how to serve it. And then from that, it just becomes infectious. I think I can't say much more than, Daniyel really said it, Christelle solidified it. Then, it's about that togetherness, the rum love, the rum family. So for me, specifically, how I would introduce people to rum at Mount Gay is through just introducing them through easy mixed style drinks, and usually in a great environment where they can't resist my charms. So this is on a beach or in a rum shop, or in a really great environment, because I think the rum always tastes better with the company you're in. And I think the rum is really complementing those moments and not necessarily leading them, just adding to them. So I think for me, it's, just tasting, and with good company, you can't go wrong.
Absolutely.
I always love your company, Miguel.
And for advice, Mitch.
Yes, please.
I have no advice for you. Really, make your own way. Make your own way. You're gonna carve your own way. Be true to yourself. Don't take yourself too seriously. And know that every single day is a learning day, and we continue to learn. As Christelle said, we are. Some people might consider me a rum expert. That's not the case in my mind. I'm learning more and more each day after day. So yeah, make your own way, carve your own niche, and you'll be fine. You're doing a great job.
Fantastic. Thank you, Miguel. So just quickly then, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear if there's anything new and exciting coming out from any of you guys that we should be keeping our ear to the ground. Ben, have you got anything we should be looking out for from yourself?
Yes, actually, I have a couple of cool things on the way. This, which is Port Rum, 22 years old, absolutely beautiful, and Versailles still as well. So these are my next two releases. They should hit stores somewhere in September, including Whiskey Exchange. So look out for it. They're fantastic rums. I think, Mitch, you tried both already.
I did. I was very lucky.
Yeah.
One of the perks of being friends with Dawn is I get to try all your releases.
Indeed.
No, they're absolutely stunning. They're wonderful. And that Port Morant's, echoing what Chris said as well. I think it's one of the best Port Morant's I've ever tried. It's absolutely incredible. So yeah, I wish you every luck with those. I have no doubt that they will be stellar successes. The world will know about Tamosi Rum. So, Daniyel, I hear there's a little cocoa action going on over there in Trinidad. What do you got going on there, Daniyel?
So two things. I know you guys are going to be doing a tasting of the number one. I think, is it the third edition of the number one you have?
Oh, good question.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'll tell you. So we did the number one in 2014. This was after we did Legacy by Angostura, which was, auctioned as the most expensive rum in the world. I know it's still arguable today. It couldn't be debated. But the price of the bottle was a whopping 25,000 euros start for auctions. The 20 bottles that were made, all proceeds went to charity. And then there was this demand for a limited stock item. So of course, 2014, we launched the first edition of the number one cask collection, meaning there's no more after that particular stock. And 2 years later, we did the second edition. I'm only giving you this story because last year in GQ magazine, they listed the top 10 spirits that you should have in your bar at home. And the second edition of the number one cask collection, which was finished 10 years in our ex-bourbon barrels and finished 6 years in a cognac cask chosen by the master distiller, was just phenomenal. I got one of the last.
That's the second edition we've got here, Daniyel.
Listen to me, big man. I got one of the last bottles in Paris, and it is empty right now. I'm sorry. Like Miguel said, I love to enjoy good company and good rum. So,
Come on,
I'm going to be doing you guys for that tasting.
If you leave now, you'll be here before we finish.
Now you have the second edition, but we did launch a third edition 2 years later, of course, in 2018. So, in respect to new, it is still new, but in terms of how new you're looking at, the newest item on our portfolio is 2 days ago when we did the unveiling of the new Angostura Cocoa Bitters. Now, again, we've been iconic. Many people have been asking, why haven't you launched a series of bitters? I'm sure if we had some unicorn tears, Angostura bitters, somebody would buy it. But
I've got to ask you, Daniyel, does the label fit?
The label is a philosophy that I always carry. It was a mistake, and this mistake became an iconic feature. And I'll tell you, it reminds me of Kanye West when he did some fashion that looked like homeless guys were wearing it. It just shows you that you can do anything with signature branding. And I'm really proud to say that we've been kind of the pioneers of signature branding. That label still costs a lot, but we still maintain the authenticity of the oversized label. It's a big man thing. So this is Caritat. It's incredible for all of the rum people here. You guys are going to love it. Again, we use the Trinitario cocoa, and if you guys know about Trinitario cocoa, it is delicious. I'm going to leave you with one little anecdote here. When I got it, I got the sample only a week ago, and when it arrived, and I cracked the bottle, and I smelled it, and I tasted it, it brought me right back to my childhood. A very nostalgic feeling. My granddad's brother had one of the largest cocoa estates in the south area of Trinidad. And I always remember walking on top of the roof where they had the cocoa beans sunbathing, and just walking on top of the cocoa beans, and then walking through the fields and picking the cocoa and just breaking it as a kid and eating the pods. And for me, I'm so happy that the quality of the bitters is just so incredible that just a smell, the bouquet and the taste brings me back to that feeling. So I hope it's going to be in the markets very soon, guys. And of course, we're going to have some special samples sent to all of our special people out there. So stay tuned. Only 2 days ago, so give us some time to get it rolled out in the markets. But it's incredible.
I cannot wait. Come on, let's go. Christelle, anything from Hampden we should be keeping an eye out for?
Wait, speaking of iconic label mistake, You'll be seeing a research of rum style at some point later this year in Europe. Yeah, because there's been such a demand for it that it's become the iconic label mistake. We decided to hold on to it with some upgrades. And then obviously we have our Great House, but we have the distillery edition, which was intended just for sale at the distillery. But demand, the Europeans broke. So we're releasing another vintage of that, the 2020 edition, and that will be coming later on in the fall. So I look forward to somehow introducing it to you guys, because I can't stay put much longer.
Well, we can't wait for you to bring it over. It's a running joke here at the office. Dawn will walk in and she'll just smell the room. She'll be like, "Are you drinking my Hampden Great House?" I'm like, "Of course."
As you should. As you should.
And I'm like, no.
No,
Miguel,
they shouldn't, Miguel.
Anything from Mount Gay we should be looking out for?
Yes, but fortunately, you have Trudy Ann coming later in your part of the 24-hour session, so she's going to tell you about those. In the interim, I could reintroduce to the world the new label, the new look of the Black Barrel and the XO. Of course, XO being that iconic liquid from the early 90s. We're now, speaking a lot more into the transparency, the integrity of the liquid and sharing all the techniques. And both liquids have been tweaked, improved, and are already, attracting gold awards and grand gold awards and a lot of positive feedback from rum experts and the like. And finally, a limited edition from Mount Gay. I've got a little sample that you sent me, and it's full, which is very rare in my house when I do get these type of samples. But I'm keeping it closed until I see you, Mitch. Thank you for having me along. I look forward to you, presenting this properly within 2 meters, I think is the rule. But then I could really go through it with you. So in terms of the Mount Gay universe, stay tuned, everybody. Trudy Ann Branker has her session a little later. I think it's at 3. I think.
Yeah. 3 o'clock UK time. We've got Trudy Ann.
So ask her about the limited, the third iteration of the Master Blenders collection that should be coming end of the year.
Very excited. Thank you so much, Miguel. And Christelle, you're also joining us again for a later session with Zan Kong and George Frost, where we're going to get into Jamaica. I'm sure that's going to be a quiet session.
Yeah, sure.
So, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and joining us for our celebration. It means so much having you all with us here. So thank you. And I can't wait to be in a bar having some daiquiris with you very, very soon.
Thank you. Rum spec. Thank you.
Thank you all. Oh, I'm going to pour a little rum.
I'm coming in to say thank
got
you.
A little...
Enter stage right.
I don't know what time zone we're all in. I think it's 6 a.m. where Christelle is. So it might be a little early, even by our standards. But
cheers, Ben. Cheers, Christelle.
Cheers, super amazing.
Absolute pleasure to have you all with us. We'll see you very soon.
Ciao.
Take care, everybody.
Wow.
Bye.